Right, folks, so this is a youth panel. I think we're going to be talking about how to engage more young people in our movement. Looking back about when Aberdeen Independence Movement got founded, we were all sitting, there was about 12 of us in a room, and 4 of us were all young people. So from the very start, Aberdeen Independence Movement has had a lot of young people involved, constantly. But this discussion's going to be quite informal and just a chat about how we can engage young people ahead of a future referendum. I remember actually, it was just yesterday in my tutorial, I'm a third year student at Aberdeen Uni, studying politics and IR. My course this year is political parties in Britain. So there's a lot of stuff about the SNP, the Greens, the Tories, it's getting quite focused on parties. And the tutor yesterday was like, actually just for so I can know, why are you all here? Why are you interested in politics? And genuinely about 70% of people in the room are all in that room because of the referendum in 2014, and that is just absolutely incredible. The rest of them are pretty much all EU citizens who'd come to study here, who weren't here for the referendum. But genuinely about 70% of people in that room were all sitting there because of the referendum, which I thought was absolutely incredible. The amount of people that got engaged in 2014 was just absolutely fantastic. And looking back on a personal viewpoint, when 2014 I was 15, so I missed the vote by about 4 months. So I was gutted, absolutely gutted. But the week before the referendum, the only undecided voters in my family were my granny and granddad, who were kind of Lib Dems at the time. I still don't really know why they were that, but they were. It was a weird time for them.
Goodness.
They told me the week before the referendum, they said, Theo, we've decided that we're going to vote yes, not because we necessarily agree with ours. Independence is something that we're naturally in favour of. It's because I can see you and your cousins all supporting independence, and it's your guys' future. And that's exactly what we need to do. And I think ahead of a referendum, any kind of referendum that we have, we need to be putting young people at the front of it. And because it's young people that are going to inspire the older generations to vote yes, which is the generations that aren't as in favour. But yeah, so that's just a personal, cute little story about my former Lib Dem grandparents turned indie supporters, which is fantastic. But I'm going to introduce the panel. So we'll start with Robyn. If you want to introduce yourself and do a wee cute story or something like that.
Okay, well I can do that. My name's Robyn. I'm the national organiser for Young Scots for Independence, which is the SNP's youth wing for under 30s. And I'm 18 right now, so during the referendum I was 13, and it sparked my interest, and I was putting leaflets on trains and leaving flyers on buses, and just kind of passive forms of activism, which at the time I didn't really associate with campaigning for independence, but looking back it probably definitely was. So I'm within Young Scots for Independence right now. I'm kind of mobilising a lot of the youth campaigning at the moment, and that's what I'm focusing on.
Hi, I'm Fatima. I'm the co-chair of the Aberdeen Independence Movement. I just got back from the European Parliament working for Christian Allard, who joked that he fired me at 12 o'clock. So, no, we've been kicked out. So, just back from there. My background is mainly in journalism. I did my undergrad at the Robert Gordon University, and I went ahead and did a master's at the University of Birmingham in international development, which covers a lot of global issues in politics. And I don't really have any cute stories. I've been involved in a lot of youth campaigning. I'm quite new to it actually. I didn't start campaigning until 2017, which was during Stuart Donaldson's campaign, which is West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine. So I'm still learning a lot in the process. And I won't say my age, but I'm closer to the 30 mark. So I've got my days numbered here.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm the media coordinator for AIM and the president of AUSNA, which is the SNP Society at Aberdeen University. And like Theo, I'm a third year politics student. I wouldn't really say I've got any sort of cute stories to do with politics. I mean, I guess a big part of my political engagement comes from, not quite anger, but frustration. Because ultimately I missed out on voting in the independence referendum by a matter of months. I missed out on voting on Brexit by a matter of months. So a lot of my political activism is focused at getting young people engaged with politics, because we have a real issue in our society where young people don't really see politics as being something that affects them, when it very much does. And we can see through, for example, government policy created in response to very low numbers of youth turnout, that does make a difference. So a lot of my activism is focused on just getting young people to vote, because that can make a world of a difference. So yeah, pass this back on.
So I'll open it up to the audience now about how we can engage young people ahead of the next referendum. I think it is obviously going to be totally vital, especially for our movement, our side of the debate. I think independence is definitely a cause that appeals to young people, and I don't think the Better Together campaign in 2014 anyway, they failed to do that dramatically. They didn't appeal to young people at all. But the Yes campaign did. How can we sustain that in a future referendum or a future Yes campaign? Up at the back.
Hi, Chris. One of the things that has been a real dynamic in politics over the past couple of years is Greta Thunberg. And I still find it a bit of a mystery to know how she managed to create such a media hype around her. You know, when she's managing to draw the president of the US into a tit-for-tat banter with her, she's really won. And can we take something from her, emulate her, use whatever that is she's got to propel everybody forward?
Okay. I think one of the things that stood out to me with Greta Thunberg is that she was empowered. She received a lot of support from her parents, from her community, and I think that took her a really long way, because I think a lot of the youth today, we feel marginalised in the movement. I don't see why our youth issues can't be brought to the forefront of the movement. Right now, Boris, Bojo, the blonde bombshell, whatever you call him, Britain's Donald Trump, the nice Britain's Donald Trump, whatever you want to call him, has said no, and of course, being dragged out of the EU against our will I feel it has hit the youth the hardest. I'm talking about our ability to move around freely in the UK, enjoy the Erasmus scheme, which was actually set up under Winnie Ewing when she was, I think she was the Culture and Education, she was on the Culture and Education Committee, I think. So we have a lot to be thankful for in Scotland, leading the way in the Erasmus scheme. And it has really, I feel that a politician like Winnie has really empowered us to be able to make use of the EU's freedoms and privileges, and that's obviously been taken away from us. So I do think that a lot of the things, I do find that in the movement, we are treated as more of we're not really treated as the participants, we're more treated as a topic, not really the participants. So whether are we the benefactors or are we the leaders in the movement? And I think a lot needs to be done in changing the narrative, in allowing us to be empowered and take the way forward, and what we need is support. So I think.
If I could just add to that, what I think Greta has done, she's taken climate change, which is such an important issue to so many young people, and we understand that it's not the wealthy or the people who are causing climate change that are suffering the consequences of it. So I think what we need to translate into our independence movement is that it's not the people who cause the problems that necessarily bear the biggest brunt of them, which is exactly the case for us for Brexit. So it's a really clear parallel, and we've just got to harness people's dissatisfaction, anger and upset about how we are not being treated fairly. So I think one thing we should definitely learn from Greta's activism is that young people don't like inequality and we want to be treated fairly, and that's what people are getting behind, so that's what we need to channel now.
I mean, I think we can all agree that, you know, what Greta's been really good at is actually getting young people involved, because I think a lot of youth involvement in politics is often young people being used almost like props. So it's sort of like, okay, right, let's just get a photo of the young people, but they're not actually listened to. So I think with Greta, what we've seen is young people are actually standing up and demanding that they be listened to and demanding that their voices be heard. And I think that's a really positive thing in our politics. Because I think if young people can actually see their voices being listened to and can actually see change coming from what they're saying, then that in itself will increase engagement and trust with our systems and our democracy.
Yeah, I think that's another thing about, like, a lot of political parties see young faces as a little media opportunity, a little photo in there and their little promo videos. But actually, I think the SNP and the independence movement as well have both been incredible in terms of engaging young people to the point where we're actually creating change in itself. I mean, Young Scots for Independence, as an organisation, I was on the NEC for them for 2 years, and throughout those 2 years we got countless amount of resolutions through SNP conference. And if you look at the likes of Mary Black, Amy Callaghan, all leading SNP politicians now leading the benches, and Mary Black got elected when she was 20. So our movement is definitely ahead in terms of that, but it's about how we can progress that in any future referendum. I'll take the next question or statement.
I'm going to suggest that too often we're expecting, or young people are looking for permission or authority or endorsement by our generation. I'm going to say turn it on the head. Don't ask them for their permission. Don't ask them for their endorsement. Take the agenda. Tell them what they want. Tell them what you need. And it's your future. Don't be an apologist for demanding your rights. If you look at the young movements on the continent, particularly university activism across the continent, it's a hell of a lot more active than it is here. And when we were undergrads, we were a lot more politically active, but not on the scale of the continent. And we've seen a dumbing down of student activism, and you're not expected to speak up for yourselves. I'm going to say to you, take the agenda, demand attention. Don't ask for attention, demand attention. This is your future, and say, this is what we want, this is what we're going to do, and if you don't like it, get out the bloody way.
Yeah.
I'd like to endorse that. I was your age when Margaret Thatcher came to power, and we had the National Front with the British National Party, and we had to put together groups like the Anti-Nazi League. Get out there, be active, be what we were, and be better than we were then, because we failed you. We're back here again with basically Thatcherism on steroids.
What I would like to just say to that is we, as young people, we know our own agenda and we know what we want to take forward. But I think the biggest difference that we're facing from when other people were younger is the media, which is something which is constantly coming at us with misinformation, lies, twisted viewpoints. That's something that I would like, if everyone could take something away from our perspectives anyway, it'd be very helpful if you're mindful of your own social media consumption and what you share. I'm consciously trying to do it and seeing, am I sharing any misinformation? Am I sharing something that's like unnecessarily inflammatory? Because it's not helpful, because the people who follow you on social media tend to also follow your viewpoint. So by sharing it, all you're doing is increasing the platform of the people you disagree with. So that's something that I would suggest anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Young people now today, we're very tech savvy. And I feel that the movement in particular, I've seen many instances, like we've faced a lot of backlash from what something like Wings of Scotland can do over social media. And that is something that has discouraged a lot of young people from getting involved in the independence movement. I've spoken to people personally because Wings of Scotland has actually come out and attacked. I'm probably going into, maybe some of you support him here, but but no, Wings of Scotland has actually come out using social media to attack young people, and this is a pro-indie person, apparently. So, sorry?
Allegedly.
Yeah, I'm going to add that because I have questions for that. So I think it's really important that, from our perspective, that we are in a digital age, and I think the independence movement, that's actually been, most of the people involved are, I'd say, over 30. Even within our organisation, I think most Aberdeen independence movement is not really balanced either. I'll point that out. So I think we need to be really cautious about what we do on a platform where young people access the most. So that's something you could probably learn from.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
sorry.
I think for a lot of young people, there's a very, very real fear that if you put your head above the parapet, you'll be shot down. So a lot of the narrative around social media as well, you know, if you're getting abuse online, just turn off your phone. It's not really that simple. I mean, the reality of modern politics is that you have to be online all the time. And that can be quite difficult when, you know the moment you say something, you're going to be attacked for it. So it's incredible, actually, that so many young people in our movement are so vocal. I mean, I'm sure many of you have been at SNP conference where you've seen that, you know, a very, very high proportion of the people speaking are young first-time speakers. So I think, I guess to sort of counter the point about young people seizing control of the agenda, I think to some level they already have. I think certainly inside the independence movement, it is young people dictating a lot of the policy and dictating a lot of the direction of the movement. So yeah, pass it back.
Yeah.
Microphone.
Yeah. One question. Yeah, when I look at polls and I see breakdowns of polls, I see young people 70%, 60 plus 70% for independence. So what can you tell us to change the narrative, to get the older folk getting it with those sort of numbers? What should the rest of us do differently?
I think certainly what was mentioned earlier about maybe slightly straying away from party political lines, just because as young people anyway, we have a wee bit of a kind of ingrained rebellious streak. If we're told by our parents to do something, there's maybe a just tiny bit inside us that just doesn't make us want to do it. So when a campaign's been fronted by people who are maybe that age or maybe have different life experiences to us, then there's maybe a sense of disengagement there. So I know personally, it's one of these things your parents sometimes say to you, oh, you've got to make your own mistakes. And it wouldn't be the same if they told me to do something and experience it myself. So what I think is really important right now is when we're learning from our friends' experience. I've got so many friends who are EU nationals and have had to apply for the right to remain here. So we are learning from each other's experience, and we can translate that into talking to people of different generations. I think definitely shouldn't be underestimated our power to kind of convince people, as Theo managed to do with his grandparents. I think that's something that kind of does need to be rolled out, but the space that we can do that in can't be party political.
I did start with empowerment because I felt it was really important. I do believe that you mentioned the high percentage of voters. I do believe that not only can we get young people increasing the vote, we can also get young people active. And that comes a lot from empowerment, because the opportunities, to be honest, the kind of reception that some young people receive when they try to get involved, like I've heard some of them, and it's not really pleasant. So I feel that it has a lot to do with the support that's out there for young people to encourage them. I know a lot has been done, like we've moved in the right direction, but I think more needs to be done there as well. Yeah.
I think a big part of bringing the older generations with us in terms of independence support comes down to knowing how to start a conversation and how to have that conversation. Because ultimately, you're not going to get anywhere by going along to Christmas dinner and presenting your gran with like an SNP manifesto or breaking out the saltires. Like you're not going to get anywhere. You've got to know how to find some way to bring up Scottish independence that might not initially be anything to do with politics or anything to do with Scottish independence. So it's about finding that in. It's about finding whatever issue might work with that person and using that as a way to sort of subtly begin to slide, because ultimately we're not going to change somebody through one big long chat. Bringing people to independence is a process. You've got to slowly chip away. You've got to be very careful. It's a very, very long process, and we've got to be mindful of that. We need to know that we're not just going to change their entire political view overnight. It's going to take time.
Next question? Yeah, Andy?
Yeah, I'm the convener of Aberdeenshire West CA USNP, and I quite often despair when I'm at branch meetings or CA meetings, and I look around the room and see how few people there are under the age of 51. I'm using 51 because I'm 50, so it means I'm young.
how do we, what can, I mean, I know meetings are boring, I fall asleep in quite a few of them, but what, I know, what can we do to liven things up and encourage more young people to become active within the movement generally? Because the support is obviously there, but we're not tapping it. So there's a fundamental disconnect between your parents' generation and your generation, and we need to bridge that in a constructive way.
Is there a youth officer in your branch?
No.
Yes.
In the branch, no. In the
Oh, the
CAS.
CAS. Yeah.
I think Young Scots for Independence I've always thought they were absolutely brilliant at engaging young people who maybe wanted to get involved in politics but didn't know how to. So when I was doing stuff for them, I realised that quite a lot of young people would directly contact us instead of branches. So there might be people in your branch that actually are active but don't do anything for your branch. I actually don't know the answer to how to engage young people in branches, but I know getting Young Scots for Independence active in your branch or whatever, so you could invite them to an event. I did a few of them in sort of remote areas with not that much in like sort of towns and villages, and that was effective by having the title Young Scots for Independence, whatever it is, like a training campaign or whatever. I always find that quite successful. When I did the events for fun for the YSI, and I did an event called Yes to Our Future, and it was a campaign basically trying to engage younger people to get active, and we only managed to do two. We did one in Aberdeen and one in Edinburgh, and in both times we did them, there was heaps of people that came that I've probably not actually seen since, so it maybe wasn't successful, but it did bring a lot of people that had never been to any meetings or anything before. And that was having the YSI's logo and photos of young people involved. If there's young people involved, younger people are probably more attracted to go to these events. So that's what I found anyway. And those events were incredibly successful. We just couldn't keep them going. But if we could get something else like that sorted, that would be fantastic.
Well, just on that, that's 3 years ago. That was my first event within the YSI, and I'm now in the executive committee for it. But I think there's success. But I do think, as you were saying, there is something to be said about young people getting involved with events run by young people, which is not to say that a lot of young people don't want to get involved in their branches, but it's maybe not the first step of the process of engagement. So definitely I would hope, certainly, that when an independence referendum is called, people will then go to their branches. But understandably, I think that the meetings aren't interesting. I'm a vice convener for my own branch, but they're not interesting. I wouldn't invite any of my friends along, and it's no one's fault other than the fact that it's a meeting scenario. Young people, we don't have all that much free time in our hands, like despite what people might say about us. So I just think that branch engagement, whilst positive, especially during election time, whilst it's not election time and you're just trying to foster support, is maybe not necessary.
So I'm in Andy's branch. Hi, Andy. I admit, I think I'm like, it was only two young people who were there. No, yeah, me and Shona. So I must admit, they are boring. We just sit and talk, and we go through financial reports, etc. So I think we're trying to, because I think when young people go to branch meetings, it's because they show an interest in politics, and a lot of the time it's because they probably want to build skills in campaigning, and they just want to build an understanding. So I think it might be difficult, but certainly in the right direction, inviting more speakers, putting on training workshops, those kind of things, activities.
I mean, I would absolutely agree with Fatima's point there, because there's very little incentive to go along to a branch meeting. It's, there's not many people excited about the prospect of talking about financial reports. But I think for a lot of young people, if they could see some level of youth representation inside their branch, that would make it a more comfortable environment for them. If they could have some sort of incentive to come along, that would also, I'm not saying that we, bribe them or anything, but if there was, as Fatima was saying, if there was some level of training on offer or some speakers or just something to sort of break up the bureaucracy. Because unfortunately, the nature of these things is, the financial reports need to be done. There's the agenda has to be stuck to. There's set things that need to be done. But that doesn't have to be the entirety of a meeting. You can sprinkle things into a meeting to break it up a bit, keep it interesting. So I guess basically just make the meetings less boring and have more young people involved and have more young people in leadership positions inside the branch is what I would say.
Can I just add that there are a lot of speakers now on the go from young Scots and from SNP students who are willing to attend branches. So if you contact, obviously, these organisations, sorry to put them on you, Robyn,
That's all right.
then please take up the offer to invite these people to speak at your branches, because that will definitely help, I think, with youth going.
Yeah, just on that as well, I've done a lot of, we've been doing a kind of YSI branch tour, and it's not massively spoken about because we don't want to be inundated, but we've gone along to a lot of branch meetings and a few CA meetings as well, and we've talked about the YSI, how our organisation works, the policies, which we've been really successful recently, as well as training, because we're quite a good campaign body, and we've been recognised that throughout the party, so it's sometimes good just to bring our new skills and try to share them with people.
Yeah. Have you?
I just, from looking at, say, like the media that's coming out from like central SNP kind of materials, I feel like a lot of it's like really standardised and not very engaging, and I feel like there should be greater integration of, because I think like the younger folks are better at using media to create more engaging content, and I don't know if there's more that we could be doing to help not only like get young people creating more content, but also like for the local branch meetings that the older generations get more skills for improving their content, because some of it's a bit, samey.
Yeah.
Let's say.
Well, I mean, that's definitely something we, like, as an organisation can think about, because I don't know if any of you have heard of memes, like a picture with funny words to go by it. And like, there's a meme page which is called Independent Memes of Scottish Nationalist Dreams, and that gets 10 times the amount of shares and likes, and it's way more engaging than any of our organisation's posts or any other youth organisation's posts, because it's funny and it takes a more humorous approach on things. Now, that's not something that can be replicated by party communications, obviously, but I think there's a lot to be said for the kind of less formal campaigning methods. I don't know, your comms, what do you have to say on it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with that point. So if we look at the content that young people engage with, it tends to be the sort of, I guess for lack of a better term, edgier content, so a lot of the memes. That's not something I would suggest your branches should engage in. That's something that could go very, very wrong, because a lot of the content that young people engage with is shared by other individual young people rather than organisations. The issue of sharing content as an organisation is you've got a risk of reputational damage to that organisation. Mm-hmm. So I think the nature of it is SNP comms is incredibly successful, surprisingly successful given the nature of what it is. So I think we've got to recognise that SNP comms has to be dry, because otherwise it would blow up in our face.
I don't think that's strictly true, though, because I do think that there's obviously not going about sharing memes, but I mean, there was a BuzzFeed interview with Mari Black, for instance, about trans tweets, and this is like kind of a in between, and I do think that there is a space for content that could be a bit more engaging from the central team rather than the central comms team, rather than, memes are a bit dangerous, but
yeah, I mean, there's definitely space for some humour. I'm not suggesting that the SNP should never ever joke about anything and should be completely serious all the time. I just think that, as you said, there's a level that's appropriate. Anybody else want to contribute to that?
I think another thing that's important is that young people need a platform that's entirely about independence. I mean, Young Scots for Independence is the youth wing of the SNP. Independence is far more than the SNP. It's the Green Party. It's all different sorts of parties, and people that actually are maybe in the Labour Party or the Conservative Party. I think that's the whole point of this conference, is that we're trying to engage with people that don't necessarily entirely agree with everything we're saying. So from what I've heard, I don't know if we're meant to say this, but I think Generation Yes is getting relaunched in the next couple of weeks, which was a fantastic tool for independence campaigning for young people in 2014. It got thousands of views on content and inspired a lot of young people, I think, and helped convince a lot of young people to support independence. So as soon as that's launched, it means that we have a nationwide young people's campaign that's not party focused, it's non-party political, and is starting to get an independence message out there every day. So I think that's another thing that's vital, which is obviously hopefully coming. I don't know if I was meant to say that or not.
Too late.
But, we'll take the next question. Yeah.
The percentage of supporters is high in the younger generation, but the problem I think we've still got is getting younger generation out to vote.
Yeah.
I know from experience, knocking on the door, and you're faced with that younger generation person, you introduce yourself, and the glaze just comes across. There's a barrier immediately there. I know I'm wasting my time. I'm this 64-year-old guy who, by the way, has worked in IT for 40 years and developed the shit you're using with the phone. So, stop being quite so condescending of the older generation. We did it, you use it. But yeah, the barriers are there. What would be useful to get from you guys is, I don't know, a card, a social media site that we can say, don't talk to me, go have a look at that. Because I do appreciate that's where you go for your information. Is there any talk about you actually producing that sort of thing that we could use for my generation?
Well, I agree with you there, because I mean, I'm a super engaged 18-year-old political activist, and if someone knocked on my door, I wouldn't answer it. So if someone came to my door, I wouldn't speak to them either. So I think there's a lot to be said for if young people aren't going to vote if they don't see the incentive to vote. So it's all fine and well people saying, oh, the voting rates are low, but if no message has been effectively communicated to them of why it's so important to them, then there's no real motivation for it. So that's a really interesting thing you were saying about a card. I mean, I would always suggest direct them to Young Scots for Independence, but not everyone is an SNP member, which I think will be an important role for Generation Yes to play, which is getting relaunched in the next few months.
Yeah, the incentive to vote, I don't think it's not even just a youth problem, it's a major problem across all generations. So I don't think a lot of the information that a lot of young people are not aware of is how different methods you can use to vote, and how early you're meant to sign up, or how late is too late. So I think probably just giving them information about how they can vote differently, like through postal. I think we need to push those kind of stuff, because a lot of young people, like this election time was held, I think some people had exams, I can't remember. So yeah, different ways of voting, and that's across for all generations, not just young people, I think.
I mean, I think everyone in this room will have experience of practically having to drag people out to vote, to almost force them to sign up to vote. I think a big way to fix that would be to insert democracy into our lives more. Because I think there's a narrative around politics that politics is something you do every few years. This is something Maggie was talking about earlier. So I think if we were to have more political conversations and were to have more knowledge of the political process and more knowledge of what the different political institutions and what they do are and how you engage with them, then I think we'd see greater engagement. I think we'd see more people registered to vote and more people actually vote. I don't think it's a fix-all, but I think it could go quite some way.
Yeah, Shona?
Yeah, I've spoken to a few friends just recently since the election, and the stuff that I've heard of them is one of them had no idea what on earth a ballot paper looked like. So they were asking me what the whole process of what to do. And another one they didn't vote at all because they don't see it affecting them until it affects them. How is it we can possibly address that and make them realise that this, with the voting, that's to make it so it doesn't affect them as bad as it does. If they don't go and vote and they get somebody that's completely muck up what they do, what they're up for.
I think maybe we're living history at the moment of the consequences of when people don't don't engage or don't understand what they're voting for, or vote for something based on misinformation, because certainly just now that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, I agree with Robyn, because a lot of the time we live in a moment, a lot of young people, so if we don't see it affecting us in that moment, then we're not going to bother. So I do feel that history does have an important role to play. We can refer to situations where it's affected young people. Even now with Brexit, we're not going to really see the impact till probably next year, because during the transition our rights are still going to be the same, which is till the end of this year really. So I do think, yeah, just looking to history a bit. The problem is, I think the difficulty we have with the situation we're in now is no country has ever tried to leave the European Union. So we don't have any example of how it will affect us. But yeah.
And sorry, just to come back on that, like within leaving the European Union, the consequences of it are kind of incomprehensible right now, because it's going to be in 40, 50 years' time when we've not had a good amount of immigration, when it's our generation's responsibility to look after ageing parents or kind of uptake care in roles that no one ever thought we wouldn't have enough staff for. So it's almost about preempting the potential consequences of not doing it and making it abundantly clear to people like why that is so essential that they act against it now.
I mean, I think there's a lot of young people who are political without realising it almost. So there are issues that they care about. It's just they might not actually engage with political parties and the political system. So I think for some people it comes down to joining up the dots and sort of explaining the, I guess, the cause and effect of government decisions. Because I think when it comes to party politics and general elections and all that, a lot of young people believe they can almost opt out of the political process by not voting, because they don't see how it impacts anything. But I think if you could explain how these decisions and how even just the act of registering to vote and turning up to vote, even if you don't vote for anything, can actually have a very real impact on government policy, I think that could do a lot of good.
Right, so we'll take one last question.
It kind of follows on for that. Should modern studies be compulsory? And also, maybe us older people sometimes have to shut up. I mean, I went back to education, and I get really annoyed at the fact that I hear people talking down education system and basically talking down young people. But people, I'm in a class with mainly 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and we're so much more mature than we were at that age. We're engaged, brilliantly mature, also in a group with fantastically young activists as well, who totally inspire us every time we go to an event. It's maybe time that the old folk actually stop talking you down and actually talk you up. It's kind of
So I'm going to try and keep this short because this is literally an area I studied. I've spoken a lot about decolonising education and making certain aspects of education compulsory on whether we should force people to study what they probably don't want to. But I do feel that in like situations when it's learning about your institutions and things that can actually affect you. If I'm looking at modern studies, I'm not saying this because it's one of my favourite subjects. Actually, history was, but looking at modern studies, I do think it's compulsory. But the problem, I do think it should be made compulsory. But the problem is how they teach it. What I was taught in modern studies was kind of rubbish. It was absolute shit. Sorry. Sorry. I should have said that. Sorry? So no, my teacher was great, but the structure of the program, structure of the module, we barely learned anything about how processes work, how we can go out to vote. We were just taught about institutions. This is your prime minister. Here's some kind of timeline or whatever. I don't know if it's changed because I went to school quite a while back. So yeah, I'm not going to tell how old I am, but I'm still a young Scot apparently. But no, and from what my 16-year-old sister is studying, I think it's rather the same, even though she's not really interested in modern studies, and it's because it's so boring to her. So I think it should be made compulsory, but we should also change it to things that are actually practical in it, not just learning about how it works, but literally go like some way. Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of modern studies comes down to the teacher and the curriculum they choose to go with. So I did modern studies to advanced higher level, so that was until 6th year. By the time I was at advanced higher level, the entire guidance for that course was half a sheet of paper. So my teacher is basically just working off of several bullet points for an entire curriculum. So I guess that means that across Scotland there's not that much consistency in terms of the standard of modern studies teaching. So I believe modern studies is currently compulsory until 4th year. I'm not sure if you should make it compulsory all the way up to 6th year, but certainly I think the 1st to 4th year curriculum could be a lot more engaging when it comes to modern studies. Because it's all very well and good explaining, the very abstract theoretical side of it, the differences between the voting systems and all that. But most people are going to turn off. I mean, I'm a political nerd. I found it fascinating. I was one of probably about 2 people in that class that actually cared. So I think again, when it comes to young people, you really have to, link something to reality instead of just talking in terms of, theoretically this is how the system works. And in most systems, this leads to that. You've got to actually say, well, here are some concretes, here's how this has actually changed things in reality.
Yeah, I actually think I learned a lot in modern studies, but it wasn't until higher modern studies. So there's no wonder that your pal doesn't know what a ballot paper looks like, because I think I only had to take modern studies until the 1st year actually. Or 2nd year, the end of 2nd year, and then I took it back in higher, and that was when I started learning about politics, and it was my favourite subject. It's my best subject. But yeah, I think it probably should be made compulsory. We've got time for one last question. Here we go.
Two quick points. The last one is a question about memes and whether you can be funny and do it in a sensible way. I couldn't help having a big chuckle inside when I remember the David Torrance political broadcast that the SNP put out. Can anyone remember that? It was so funny.
Very effective.
Very effective. For anyone who knew what was going on.
I think that was the one where Nicola Sturgeon appears out of nowhere. What has the SNP ever done for us?
Sorry. It's about what Sean was saying and getting people out to vote. There's still, believe it or not, people who will not register to vote because they think that they're still getting chased for poll tax. There's also people in our transient population who, even people who were born here, who consider somewhere else home, that will not register to vote because of racism. So there's a lot of other reasons people actually will never register to vote. And I know people in both those groups, and I've had long ongoing discussions with them about, there is no reason that you cannot register to vote, and they won't do it for fear. So if you've any ideas on those.
So on the issue of people, I think what you did say is that people don't register to vote because they think it's pointless because they're not really represented, and is that where you're going with the whole racism thing? Obviously I'm from a minority ethnic background, and I do admit that I don't see any representation for myself in politics, to be honest, in Scottish politics, especially in British politics. But I do believe that the first step is really getting involved and understanding that the personal is political, whatever decision you make. So would you rather not vote and let someone who would make your situation worse win, or at least say something? So I do believe it's a very tricky one, because some people will be like, why just waste your time? But I think it took me years. The reason why I only joined late in the game is it took me years to really think about it. But it's a difficult one, to be honest, I must admit. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I agree it's a difficult one as well, because I was out chapping doors near where I'm from, and I asked a man, and how do you feel about independence? He's like, well, I voted yes last time, but... I was like, well, what's this but? He's like, well, last time I did get done for tax evasion. So he said, I won't vote for it again, Lily. So I'm really a bit at a loss. That's what I said. I was like, it won't happen twice, Philip. So I'm also looking for a solution for this one.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's incredibly difficult to build trust in a system that is often discriminated against people, and it's even more difficult to rebuild trust that has been broken once it's been won. So quite frankly, I've got no idea how you go about doing that. I've got no idea at all. I mean, all I can say is you've got to try to build that trust. You've got to try and gain that trust. You've got to try and win that trust. But again, that's not something that can be done quickly. That's something that will take time. So I think outreach into communities that we know typically don't vote in the same numbers as other groups, for a start, would be good. I think representation would also be good. I mean, I get it's ironic, I'm a white man talking about representation, but really our political system is not representative at all. We need to actually connect with people, we need to actually connect with groups, because otherwise you can't build that trust.
I think that's all we've got time for today. So thanks everyone for coming. Thank you very much for all the speakers. It's been a fantastic day. I've learned a lot. Had a bit of an issue with the documentary. It's getting released tomorrow at 12:30 now instead, because the Wi-Fi in here doesn't work very well. And neither does the coffee house next door, as I found out. But thank you all very much for coming, and thank you very much to all the speakers for taking part and helping make a lively discussion. And a special thanks to Alan, who's a tireless organiser, never has a break for himself. Thank you very much.
Might be a good idea next time for the young people at the beginning or the middle of the thing rather than the